Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Tuesday, June 18th, 2013 meeting of the Urban Village Development Commission. This is the first summer session that we'll have. Go ahead and call the meeting to order right now at 7:04. We're going to start the meeting off with the meeting minutes, approval of the meeting minutes from two different meetings. First one will be from Tuesday, March 19th. You should have all received these. Anybody have any questions, edits, comments? No? Okay. And then how about for the June 4th meeting 2 weeks ago? We also received that. Any comments or questions? We'll go ahead and approve them both at the same time. Yes, Chantel?
I had a very minor one, but on page 3 of the minutes, we have, I was referring to green roofs, and we have green in quotes. Green roofs are pretty well established
as a term?
As a term,
yeah.
So I don't think we need quotes there.
Okay. Good. Anything else? Okay. Do we have a motion to approve both of the meeting minutes?
I'll move that we approve both the March 19th and the June 4th meeting minutes.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Both passed. Thank you. All right, we will move on to the site development permit for the Brownstones, Issaquah Highlands. I do want to state, and sort of statement and a question, Lucy, that this will also be a decision at the end of this, correct?
Right. So this is the first of two meetings. At the next meeting, you will be asked to make a decision. So you guys are the decision makers, which means as a quasi-judicial matter, you need to not have conversations outside of here, and if you have any conflicts of interest or perceived conflicts of interest, you'll be asked to disclose those at the next meeting.
Perfect, thanks. Okay, so let's move on to the presentation, and who's going to deliver today? Is it?
We're going to start with Ben.
Okay, Ben. Welcome.
Okay, the Brownstones at Issaquah Highlands. My name is Ben Rakowski. I'm the Development Project Manager.
You have to get close.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. My name is Ben Rakowski. I'm the Development Project Manager for Polygon Homes. We're excited to build on the success of the Forest Ridge community, and we look forward to working with the UVDC and the city staff and the ARC to develop another successful community. The Brownstones at Issaquah Highlands is a 176-unit townhouse condominium project. The rendering shown is one of the color schemes that we're looking at, but this still needs to be developed with the ARC. But I just wanted to give you an idea of the kind of the scale of what it is that the project that we're looking at here. All of the color schemes that we're looking at, the exterior will include some sort of brick or masonry, which we feel the brownstone look is fits well with the urban scale intended for the site. We'll offer 3 different floor plans with 3 to 4 bedrooms in each unit. All units will have 3 stories of living space, with some units getting a 4th story in the loft space above the 3rd story. So one of the unique features that some of the floor plans will have is a live workspace. About 25% of the units will have this space, and I've shown where that space will be in the red rectangle here. So what this is it's a ground level space that will have exterior access, a full bathroom, and a closet downstairs. And this would make an ideal unit for someone who wanted to use a space as a home office. Alternatively, it could just be used as a den or a bedroom, but it is kind of a unique feature here. So the site plan, you also have a site plan in the packet that we handed out, and it might be a little bit easier to see than on the screen. But I wanted to point out that vehicular access to the units will be from the interior drive aisles. All the units will have a minimum of 2 parking spaces, 1 in the garage, 1 in the driveway, but 2/3 of the units will have 2 parking spaces in the garage and 2 in the driveway, for a total of 4 parking spaces. So a couple of the features that I wanted to point out, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about these, is the pedestrian promenade, which is along the west-facing site, or boundary of the site, which is shown in red. The pedestrian plaza, shown in yellow, and then the street-facing units, which are shown in blue. The pedestrian promenade will sit up above Highlands Drive. This could be used as an alternate route to the Grand Ridge Plaza, or a social gathering place for the community. We envision this walkway having a few overlook nodes with benches and enhanced landscaping. The landscaping in this area could be in raised planter boxes, as an example, but the idea is to have this fit the urban theme and the street front feel that is also throughout the site. The pedestrian plaza, which is shown in yellow, it's the north-south connection through our community, connecting the Discovery Heights to the south to the Grand Ridge Plaza to the north. The design and the elements that will be in this plaza are something that we'll work out with the city and the ARC, something that will benefit our community as well as the surrounding communities. Then we have the street-facing units. So our design for these will include landscaping in the front, wider sidewalks with trees in tree grates as opposed to in planter strips. And the idea there is just to enforce the urban feel of the community. Most of these street-facing units will also be the live-work units, which I mentioned earlier. So that's just a brief overview of the Brownstones at Issaquah Highlands. City staff will be going into a little bit more detail, but I'm happy to answer any questions or provide further detail when time is appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Tim, do you have a question there?
The work units, do they have access to the living space, or is it?
Tim, is your microphone on?
Sorry. Do the work units have access to the living space inside, or is the only access through the outer door?
There is access from the inside. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, should we go into the staff report and then? Oh, you have a question, Chantal? Sorry.
The land shows a pretty steep drop from higher part to a lower part. Is that going to be graded kind of a very gradual? There's not going to be a dip at some point in the...
Right. It'll be pretty gradual going from the east to the west, the high side to the low side. Pretty much what's out there, the site is constrained from 10th on the east side to the wall above Highlands Drive. So those grades are set. Nothing will be changing there. But in between, it'll be a pretty gradual slope through there.
Okay. Lina, did you have something? Okay. Sure.
You mentioned that there were at least two, possibly 4 parking spots for each unit. Is there any other parking besides that?
Yeah, we do have a few other spots on the interior of the site, as well as around the perimeter of the site. There's street parking, and there's other streets in the area as well with street parking.
Okay, so let's go to the staff report. It'll probably answer a lot of these questions as well, and we'll certainly have time to ask more. So is that going to be Mike or Lucy?
Yeah.
Mike? All right. Thank you, Ben.
Good evening. My name is Mike Martin. I'm an associate planner with the Development Services Department. This is my first time in front of this body, so it's nice to see all y'all. I will present the staff report for file number STP 130002. And again, this is the site development permit for blocks 21 and 22 Polygon. So first, I'm just going to open up my presentation and give you some background about the location and the context of the site relative to the land uses that surround it. So here we have just a general vicinity map, and I'll try to use my mouse to orient you, but here we have blocks 21 and 22. This is the site. It's 8.48 acres. Coming up the hill here is Highlands Drive. Northeast Discovery Drive is the primary street here to the south. On the east is 10th Avenue Northeast. Northeast Ellis Drive on the north side, and then Highlands Drive on the west. Just some other predominant landmarks. The Safeway fuel station will be right here in Block 4E. Safeway groceries going up right now. If you guys have been up there lately, you've seen a lot of construction going on. Things are really starting to pick up there. And then the blocks to the north, has been indicated, are the Regency project. To the south and to the east is the Discovery Heights project, and that's a predominant multifamily residential community. So this site will function together with the residential site to kind of create a multifamily project down here to the south. Again, this is just an aerial photo. This is here if we need it. We can reference back. This was taken in 2012, so it's pretty accurate, but a lot of stuff has been built subsequent. This is another close-up. I just put this in here in case we want to look at the roads. You can kind of see Discovery here, its configuration. However, when this photo was taken, Ellis to the north wasn't open yet, so that's there if we need it. Just to touch on a little bit of summary. As I stated, it's 8.48 acres. With the 176 units, that gives the project a density of 20.75 dwelling units per acre. These units will be dispersed in 33 buildings. They are 3, 4, and 6 unit buildings, and they are approximately 40 to 45 feet in height.
Excuse me, Mike.
Yes.
Real quick.
Mike, real quick question, because
Sure.
I'm seeing blocks 21 and 22 on here, but on some of the maps, I'm seeing a tract QV.
Oh, I'm sorry. Good catch there. May I get to that in the site plan?
Just want to make sure we address it as
I'll
you do
definitely touch on that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. This is the applicant has chosen the traditional townscape neighborhood type, so these will be designed as such. And then the last item I have here talks about a required pedestrian plaza that's located within that tract QV. Tract QV is a 0.67 acre site. There will be a lot line adjustment to reduce that slightly, but that will be the location of a pedestrian plaza that's required, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So I want to continue providing a little bit of context to the site just to get you guys oriented, and I've got some photos. Up to the top right, you can see the photo corresponding with the location and the viewing angle indicated by the arrow. So starting with number 1, this is taken from Discovery Drive to the south. This is kind of at the entrance of the Block 24 DevCo project. You can see a bit of grade there. What jumps out about this one is the predominant wall there. Someone asked about the grading of the site, and it's a pretty flat site because this wall is holding back a lot of earth. So the building pad itself is very flat. Slight grade from east to west. Number 2 is taken from 10th Avenue Northeast and Discovery. So there you can see, these photos are all about a week, within the last week or two. You can see the Block 24 there going up. Yeah, I'm sure that's better. Thanks. Number 3 is taken from 9th Avenue. This is going to be about at the southeast corner of the Safeway site that's being constructed. It's kind of looking across 4E, but I selected this one because it kind of shows the context. The building pad 21 and 22 is right here where I'm kind of hovering my mouse, and it's kind of framed in by the Block 23 and 24 projects around it. And then this number 4 is taken internal to the site looking east. Over here you can see this is what is going to be Dick's Sporting Goods right here. And then again the Block 24, or 23, excuse me, back there. 4 more, I'll try to get through these quickly. Number 5 is taken internal to the site looking northwest. Again, you can see it's relatively flat. It does change in elevation going west. It goes down a little bit. Number 6 is looking down Discovery Drive. Number 7 here is at the intersection of Northeast Ellis and 10th Avenue Northeast. Again, you can see Dick's Sporting Goods. The project itself is going to be all of this. And then lastly, this one's looking across the future pedestrian plaza in Block 4E. Block 4E is at the intersection, per se, of where 10th Avenue and 9th split. And as you look across that, you can see what is a pretty large wall there with a kind of a granite finish. Here's a site plan. It's not as pretty as the one Ben provided, but I think it'll show us what we need to know here. We'll start with access. Vehicular access will be from 2 driveways on either side, north and south. So at the south, at Discovery Way, you have 2 driveways here that lead into internal alleys, and you have the same thing at the north. And I'll talk more about all the circulation, vehicular, pedestrian, and bicycle in a little bit. Central to the site, you have an open space here, and you have a second open space between these 2 buildings, which is 7 and 8, and 2 and 3 here. So this is another open space. And then lastly, you have the required track QV plaza. This is a requirement from several years ago. It was an agreement with Port Blakely to build parks in Issaquah Highlands, and that requirement has been levied against blocks 21, 22. The requirement itself is for a 4,000 to 15,000 square foot plaza, I believe, and I think they're proposing 20,000 square feet here, so it should be a pretty nice size and should be something really cool. So I'll move on here to pedestrian circulation. First, I'll start with if you were a pedestrian and you wanted to get through or around the site, your primary routes. Around the outside, the dotted lines are all sidewalks. There's sidewalks on all 4 sides of this site. Overall, the ped access here is really good. If you want to be internal, if you need internal access, starting over here from 10th, there's a regulated trail. It's a neighborhood trail. It'll be about 6 to 8 feet wide. The drawings that were submitted show 10 feet. That'll probably be necked down a little bit to between 6 and 8 feet. So a pedestrian headed east to west would head across here through this open space and then to this outer area, which I think you guys referred to as a promenade. All these solid lines will be regulated neighborhood trails. Lastly, there are a few of these dots in here. These are going to be unregulated paths. We recognize that there may be pedestrians that seek a shortcut, and it might make sense, but these are not something that we're going to highlight by any means. And then, of course, north-south will be a predominant pedestrian way through here, and it will also include bicycle facilities through the north-south. Vehicle circulation, I kind of talked about how you get in and out of the site. Everything inside the site, well, let me take a step back here, I apologize. I just want to talk about front door access to all these units. So there's 2 types. Everything on the perimeter will have a front door very close to the sidewalk, the public sidewalks. And then these units that face internal to the site, which would be 27 through 33 here and some of the units in here that face onto open spaces, they will be serviced off of a neighborhood trail. So I guess what's important to note is that every house has a predominant ped entrance, either from a public sidewalk or from a trail. These ones over here will be really, really nice because they have another neighborhood trail, but they come up along this this wall right here, which I'm going to talk about a little later. It gets pretty high, and it's going to be a really nice facility here, and I'll talk a little bit more about some other of the little pet area, informal areas that they're proposing. Back to vehicles. Again, I talked about the ingress and egress at the north and south. These will all be 18-foot wide alleys, and then they'll all service the driveways and garages on site. I didn't provide a map for bicycle circulation, but in case you want to know, there's a bike lane on Highlands going to the north. Ellis Drive will have shared in-lane. Bikes will just be in the road in essence, and that's the same with 10th Way. 10th Avenue Northeast has a Sharrow, and there's some facilities through Discovery and through the Block 24 project, including access to the trail that connects over to Swedish.
Mike?
Yes.
Can you explain what a Sharrow is?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
A Sharrow is not quite a bike lane. What a Sharrow is it's a marked indicator within the travel lane that shows that that bikes will be in the travel lane. So sometimes you'll see it's not a designated bike lane, but you'll still see the painted bike symbol, and that's telling drivers that there will be bikes in the roadway. And I think they tend to be a little wider, but I'm not positive about that. Parking. I've pulled these from the staff report, and, well, what's important to know is that each unit within this project requires 2 parking spaces. As Ben indicated, all provide 2 and most provide 4. In total, the project requires 352 parking spaces. They are proposing 613 spaces. Most of those will be either in the driveways or the garages, but there's additional parking provided on the streets indicated by these stars, and I believe that's 25 spaces with an additional 11 spaces internal, which would be in parallel parking stalls within the alleys. So in total, we have 613 spaces. They have, they exceed the requirement, the code requirement, by 261 spaces. So they do have a lot of parking. Bicycle parking is code required 1 per 12 required vehicular spaces, and by that they are required to have 29 or 30 spaces. We anticipate that most people would store their bikes in their homes. However, there's a condition that will require them to have bike racks as well throughout the site in case visitors want to park their bike or someone wants to enjoy the plaza in the middle or the open spaces.
I have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
So the parking is that 10th, I think, on the east side there?
Yes.
Because there's, I think, some neighborhood right across the street, right? So will that be regulated in any way, or is that just up to the developer to?
It's public parking, so it's not no one will be able to declare it as their own. It's kind of first come, first serve, and Polygon won't be able to say it's for their tenants, and likewise, DevCo cannot say it's for their tenants.
Oh, okay.
Does that answer it for you?
It absolutely answers the question. Thank you.
One thing I should note about 10th Avenue, right now it's constructed with some head-in diagonal parking, and this proposal would address that and change it to parallel on-street. So that's one change to the street configuration that Polygon is proposing with this project. I talked a little bit about site walls, and I just wanted to highlight them because they are a big part of this site. Coming up Highlands, this is kind of what you see. It's this wall that's got some faux granite treatment to it. It should be noted that there is a landscape plan that Port Blakely had, I think, from a couple years ago, and Polygon will be satisfying the requirements of that, but it puts landscape in this area down here. This is the same wall kind of looking up Discovery Drive. Different perspective down here from Discovery looking down, so you can see how the grade change is real there. This is, I wouldn't call it steep, but it's definitely got some grade to it there. Okay. So if I take a step back, you can see this kind of tells you where the grade is. All of these are not accessed off the sidewalk because of this wall, whereas these are at grade with the sidewalks around. to give you kind of an idea of the grade there. This one here up on the first one is right where the wall begins on Highlands. This is looking south, so you can see at the northwest corner of the site, it again becomes level with the sidewalk.
Mike?
Yes.
I'm sorry, when you say those ones on the southwest corner are not accessed by the sidewalk, you mean by the existing sidewalks on Highlands Drive and Discovery, correct? But there will be the pedestrian access from the promenade, I think is described as, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll kind of tell you. So these ones up here will be accessed from the sidewalk.
That's on Ellis.
That's on Ellis.
Yep.
And then as we get to here, they become accessed from what we regulate as a neighborhood trail.
Right.
And that will be a trail that spans the perimeter. And it also includes these ones at the south here on Discovery.
And then to the west of that is a sidewalk at street grade, which is significantly below
Exactly.
the neighborhood. Okay.
Once you get to here, pretty much the whole Block 22 side is at grade with the existing streets.
Right,
Or
okay.
it will be once it's graded. It won't take a lot of grading to get it level with the streets.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Plaza and open spaces. As I mentioned, there's a required open space in track QV per some previous commitments in Issaquah Highlands. Not much technical details were not provided for how that's going to look, how that's going to feel. So we've conditioned it that Polygon needs to work with Development Services Department and the ARC to come up with amenities and solutions that balance let me take a step back. You have two things going on here. You have units that are accessed off of that plaza, so we need to strike a balance between providing them some privacy while also celebrating what is a very public space and has bicycle facilities. So because the details weren't, not a lot of detail has been provided yet, I think Polygon's looking for the opportunity to work with the city and the ARC to come up with a space that makes sense for everybody. So with that, I don't have a lot of information about what is proposed for the plaza, but I did also want to highlight these other overlooks. These aren't regulated by the development agreement because they're under 2,000 square feet, but this one's at the south, and if you remember looking back to that wall really quick, so this one at the south is going to sit right up here. It's going to be a really unique space. I think it's a great opportunity. They're kind of showing a little lookout here and some nice landscape. So it'll just be a kind of an informal space for people to enjoy the westerly vista. This should have amazing views of Lake Sammamish and looking out west towards Seattle. The one on the, well, now I'm just confusing. This is at the northwest corner again, where this is flush with the sidewalk. This isn't going to have the predominant high-level overlook, but it is a nice feature at the northwest corner, and it really provides a nice context and frame to the corner of the project, especially for peds and cars driving up Highlands. That's a very nice general overview of the project. I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have, and then I'll conclude once we finish with questions with some unique conditions that you may not have seen before that I will go ahead and read.
Okay.
Michael?
Let's start with Mike. Yeah.
Thanks, Mike. Hey, first question I have for you is the trails that run east to west. You said they're 6 to 8 feet wide.
Yeah.
Is that just exclusive of the walk path and the landscaping is wider?
Yeah, I believe the corridor is 12 to 14 feet.
Okay.
So the actual corridor required for the neighborhood trail is 12 to 14, so it's 6 to 8 feet, and then we have what's called a border, which usually has landscape facilities and such to kind of complete the section.
Okay, thanks. And
Yep.
then I'm a little curious when I look at the QV plot for the plaza there.
Yeah.
If you go back to the satellite photo, it looks like there's a road there right now.
So what it was is, it is right now what was going to be 10th Way Northeast, and that was a remnant from the High Streets project. So that road goes away and becomes this plaza.
Okay, so I'm just curious, there's no, are there any utilities or anything? There's just pavement at this point in time?
It sounds like it's just pavement and there are no substantial utilities or anything like that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jeff. Mike, nice job, by the way. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. This might be more for Ben and the applicant, but I'd like to see, before we approve, cross-sections of the street-facing homes and the sidewalk and also the promenade, because the photographs he showed don't really match up very well with what's the elevations. For example, when you look at the photographs for the front-facing, they show steps coming perpendicular out of the units and a little bit of room in front. When you look at the elevations, the steps come out of the house and run parallel to the building and probably much shorter, so I want to get a sense of the scale between the curb and the front of the building. Does that make sense, Ben, what I'm looking at?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think I know what you're getting at. And if you look at the sections that I provided in the handout, did you happen to see those ones?
If they did not penetrate. How's that?
I think that this is
You
going
didn't see
to.
them till- You didn't get them till
Okay.
tonight, Carl, so,
They kind
Let me see.
They don't show the front face when there's.
Right.
And I've got a couple extra copies up here. Do you need one?
No, I've got mine, thank you.
So,
Let me look while we're doing the rest of the things, and then I'll come back later if I'd like to.
well, I'd be happy to
potentially see
just
more.
kind of just kind of step us through the.
Yeah,
the-
Go
why don't
for
we
it.
go ahead and do that?
Okay. So the first one is section AA, which goes through the Highlands Drive, through the wall, and then through the first couple buildings that we have there. So you can see that the first level, which is where the live workspace, that would actually be at grade, and then you would come up a half flight of stairs to the front door. And then once you get inside the building, you'd come up another half set of stairs to get to the first story.
What building are we talking about right
This
now?
would be
Section AA, which is Promenade.
through building
cutting
22.
yeah.
Building 22, okay. Okay, yeah, I see it. Yeah, I see that.
So the first story of that building would be sitting at grade at the promenade.
Right.
And then at the other end of the site, we have, let's see here, which would be section CC. That building would actually, you know what, I think that this is drawn incorrectly on here because that side of the site, so that would be building 3, going through building 3, that would have the same condition as at the promenade, where the first story would be sitting level with the street, and then it would drop down, going through the building. And then the section BB is just a section through the promenade, and that kind of just shows the relationship of those buildings, how those will, I'm sorry, not the promenade, but the pedestrian plaza. So that shows how those buildings will sit in relation to the plaza that's going through the middle of the site.
That helps because section CC looks more like the photograph, whereas this cover is a different type of building, and that's what was really catching my eye.
Okay.
Thanks, Ben.
Yes.
Thank you, Carl. Yes, Eric.
I was just hoping to get better clarity on those particular units that don't have full parking. You said that the corners were cut off or something. Could you clarify that real quick?
I'll take that.
Those will be unique conditions, right? And that'll be tied to,
so it might be good, usually we read through the unique conditions, so why don't we have
let's do
Mike
that.
do that, and then we can go into the full discussion, make sure that we have the full picture. Is that okay?
yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Conditions start on 33, Commissioner. FYI.
Okay. So as you know, with these projects, there tends to be some conditions associated with the approval. This particular project has 56 conditions, I believe. Many of them you have seen before. They are standard conditions that end up on all of our permits. And then there are some unique conditions that are specific to this site. I believe I've highlighted 15 of them that I'm going to share with you now. And I'll go ahead and read those, and then we can have discussion following. So starting with number 1 on page 33. Prior to submittal of construction permits, building or utility, a lot line adjustment must be submitted to reduce the area of tract QV. And if you guys want to ask questions, feel free to jump in.
Now, I'd like to get through the conditions first.
Okay,
Probably,
perfect.
unless there's something really urgent.
No, let's just get through them. Perfect. Number 2, the notice of plaza requirement on block 21 shall be relocated to tract QV prior to certificate of occupancy for any building. Number 13, the pedestrian network should be visually indicative of where routes lead by providing termini that assist in orientation, nodes and design features that distinguish routes, and the ability for pedestrians to see destinations as a point of reference. Number 18, prior to the approval of utility permits that enable grading on the site, the applicant must include details about how the existing wall tiebacks will be removed, cut down, or buried, and how the existing facilities will be impacted and restored. This condition will be enforced during utility permit review. 19, fencing and/or signage that informs bicyclists to dismount from their bikes may be required where the neighborhood trail is located above the western retaining wall. The appropriate safety features will be reviewed and approved with the utility permit. Jumping to number 27. The paving adjacent to alley intersections shall be widened or expanded as necessary to accommodate emergency vehicle access, based on auto turn or similar technical information. However, where this occurs, design techniques shall be employed to maintain slow private vehicular speeds. This condition will be enforced during utility permit review. 29. The intersection of the westernmost alley with Northeast Ellis Drive includes a provision in the existing lane taper on Northeast Ellis Drive. Prior to the approval of utility permits for this connection, the applicant must show, through analysis, that the revised taper is suitable and safe for the expected traffic volumes and patterns. This condition will be enforced during utility permit review. 31. An AMM, Administrative Minor Modification, shall be processed to modify the configuration of 10th Avenue Northeast in order to accommodate changing the on-street parking configuration from head-in angled to parallel and to increase the width of the landscaped area. Utility permits for this road may not be submitted until the AMM has been approved. 32. Complete the bike system by providing north-south bike facilities as part of the track QV Plaza. Signage and design features should be provided to identify changes and/or options for routes. These improvements shall be completed prior to certificate of occupancy. Jumping all the way to number 50. Landscape for use along the alleys shall be located or height restricted to ensure it will not interfere with emergency services or waste collection trucks. 51. The southernmost driveway edges of buildings 28 and 31 shall be treated with landscaping, walls, green screen, or other comparable treatment in order to reduce the presence of driveways and alleys for the end units of buildings 29 and 30. 52. Where residential driveways are in direct view of an adjacent sidewalk, their presence shall be minimized, providing a landscaped hedge or wall. 53. The plaza located in tract QV is approved on a conceptual basis only. Further review is required with the construction permits to ensure that the appropriate features are provided, including but not limited to suitable pedestrian and bicycle circulation facilities, sitting areas, colored and varied surface materials, street furniture, bike racks, fountains, public art, landscape, kiosks, etc. And finally, 56, an AMM shall be processed to modify the stretch of neighborhood trail that is above the western retaining wall where there is insufficient room for a trail border. Utility permits for this neighborhood trail may not be submitted until the AMM has been approved. So that concludes our unique conditions for this project.
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other commentary before we start with questions? No? Okay. Who's got questions? Commissioner Lee.
Thank you, Commissioner Walker. We're always this formal, Mike. This would be back on the trail plan, I think it's called, pedestrian circulation. On the northwest and southwest corners, you have those extra little path pieces, the dotted lines. And I'm curious, it looks like you've got similar kinds of conditions on the northeast and southeast corners, the sidewalk and entry into the blocks. I'm wondering why there's not a similar type of trail there. You see what I'm referring to?
Are you meaning
Yes.
this?
One of those, and you have one in the lower left. And I'm surprised that there is not one in the lower right and the upper right, like
Here?
right there and there. Correct.
Yeah, so these are kind of, we debated on whether or not these should be regulated trails. And our thought was that because these are also driveways and that they don't have a good pedestrian receiving facility, that it's not really appropriate to route pedestrians off of the sidewalk into an alley that doesn't have an appropriate receiving facility. So what we're really trying to do is steer them through the primary routes. We recognize that probably residents might utilize these little shortcuts, and treatment like maybe stepping stones or something would be suitable in those locations. But I don't think it's something that we want to highlight because it's going to dump pedestrians out into a traffic lane without an appropriate receiving facility.
Terrific. Thank you.
On the color picture that we have here with the legend, how accurate is that legend? Because I'm a little bit confused about some of the topography there with where it says partial buried unit, full exposed unit, and how it seems like the whole site's kind of wavy according to this.
So the difference in the units is, I think that we recognize that the site is moving, kind of moving down. One of the ways that we can take up grade from throughout the site is through the building. So on the starting on the 10th Avenue Northeast, and I apologize, when I spoke before, I was saying that the live work unit would be at grade at that street. That's actually incorrect. The way this building is set up, the live work unit, which actually in that building would not be considered a live work unit because we wouldn't be able to have a front door out to the street because it actually would be set down a couple feet. So it would have a window well in that building. So that building, the first story would be partially buried, and then the garage side out the back of the building would be fully exposed.
And that's which building?
This is, so if we're looking at buildings 1 through 4.
1 through 4, okay.
So that's what it means by the partial bury unit.
Okay. So, but is there gradation changes happening within the site? Like if you look at, buildings 21, 22, 23 are fully exposed, then it goes to partially buried, and then it comes back to fully exposed with 31 through 33, which kind of makes like a waving topography in a way.
Yeah,
I'm not looking at this right.
It's gradual from going from east to west.
Okay.
It doesn't go up and down.
Okay.
I think the reason why it might be a little bit misleading is because you may have one building that's fully exposed and then the building next to it is a partial bury building, and that's because the building next to it needs to set down a little bit in order to make up a couple feet. So that's why we kind of go from a fully exposed building to a partial bury to a fully exposed to a partial bury. It's because it's kind of taken steps through the site.
Okay. I think that's it. I had a different question. I don't know who's the right person to answer.
Go ahead with it.
looking at the ingress and egress facing towards Ellis, that indentation at the top, I'm still looking at the same picture, is that then the entrance to the retail? And so are we looking at three different, like right in a row, three different ways for cars to come out onto Ellis? So no light or anything happening?
One being 10th Avenue, is that what you're saying? That's
No, I'm looking at Ellis. See how there's the
Right in the
two
middle,
drive aisles
Ellis.
coming out, and right in between that, adjacent to the park
oh, the
strip
the one across from it is
is
the third
another.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I don't know if there's going to be only right turns allowed, or if you're having a right-left situation with no light at three different points.
So I think I can shed light on that.
Okay.
So this is track QV right now where this road is.
Mm-hmm.
The alleys that are shown here are kind of going to be on either side of this. Now this up here is a continuation of 10th Way Northeast, which is going to be the road that Dick's fronts onto. So this is going to be a primary vehicle way for vehicles entering the Grand Ridge Plaza Retail Center. I think it kind of shows it. So this doesn't show it well, but on either side of this, there are like ADA ramps, and I think it's proposed that there would be a crosswalk spanning Northeast Ellis to get to the opposite sidewalk and into the Grand Ridge Plaza project. Does that answer your question?
Well, no, I was wondering, is it going to be possible for people to come out of both of these drive aisles and make right or left, and then you also have something in the middle that people are going to be making right or left? So there's like three different ingress, egress within, looks like about a block,
Well,
a long block.
there's two ingress and egress on each north and south, and it's expected that vehicles will be able to go left or right out of the site.
So if I could add some, what I'm hearing is you're concerned about the quantity of traffic
Or just the quantities of
and the ability for
ingress and
cars
egress in a short.
to move in and out of there, because there are going to be lots of traffic coming from the retail area, from Dick's Sporting Goods, as well as potentially, a bunch of traffic coming from either one of those things. One of those,
Well, they don't face each other. There's like you hear
right.
one in
So
the
it's
middle.
going to be, yeah, it could become a bit of a bottleneck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us how it's done, Dan.
Yeah.
The current plan is that there would not be a signalized intersection at either one of those. It's the road coming out from Dick's is a street intersection. The two alleys that come up would be driveway cuts. So there's not three roadway intersections in close proximity there. There's a roadway intersection and two driveways. It doesn't change the number of cars there, but it does change the perception of drivers on hierarchy and who potentially has a right-of-way, et cetera. Right now, there doesn't appear to be a need for a signal at that intersection, but we'll confirm that and come back to you in next meeting with details about that.
Thank you. Good question.
Not for Dan, but I go back to my parking question. On page 5, it talks about additionally there are some units located on corners that show driveways that did not meet the requirements. Can you just have some clarity on that as far as for parking?
He's talking about, like,
So what happened is, because some of the alleys require a certain radius for emergency vehicles, there happens to be a taper. One instance where you can see it is on building number 30 and 26. You can see how their driveways are slightly tapered on one side, on one corner. Our requirement is that driveways have to be less than 8 feet or more, or 18 or more feet. You can't be in that wiggle room window because it's not intended for a vehicle to park, but vehicles still will. So that's what that discussion on page
5?
Is it on 5? That's what that's getting at. So we're going to need to work through that, and we've kind of started discussions with Polygon about how we're going to remedy that situation, but at this point, we haven't resolved it yet, and that'll be something that we're aware that you're concerned about, and we'll have a comment for that with the briefing response memo at the
And
next
I would just
meeting.
also like to add, and thank you for taking that, and so the parking that's on the 10th, that's shared, it seems to be public parking. It would just seem that I don't know if there's anything in our purview to be able to try to add, or this parking is somehow regulated or permitted or something where the residents of this get to, you know, I mean, just for anyone to come there and park, I don't know. I'm just wanting to add that.
From a priority standpoint?
Right.
Yeah, I think that's going to be very difficult because
Yeah,
across
yeah.
10th Avenue are going to be all of those
Right.
Discovery Heights
So it
apartments,
just seems like
condos,
it's not
right?
really part of this project, that
Yeah.
just parking on the street. you
Well,
know.
but I think that's consistent with the rest of Issaquah Highlands.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any place that's got restricted parking for specific development.
So you're not-
Except for Scott's house.
There are a few. But you're not counting 10th Avenue parking spots as part of that 600 and some number, are you?
Yeah, they were.
No, they are.
They are, okay.
Yeah,
So,
that's
but those
why
are,
I
okay, so those are shared spots, though. So how do you count those if they're
The
shared?
spots directly adjacent to the project can be credited toward the project. However, I would note that
Were they credited toward Discovery Heights as well?
no.
We don't double count.
I'm just asking.
So 589 sites are located internal with the residents. And then that leaves the difference of 613. So it's 25 along the streets and then 11 internal. So 36 are kind of public, well, they're open spaces to anybody.
And that includes Ellis, 10th, and Discovery.
And
Those 25.
and the 11 within the alley parallel parking.
Right, okay. So that's an interesting point, Eric. You know, I don't know that those can be designated, but they are counting them, so it could become a challenge.
I mean, in the end, they're over, you know, they're within,
Yeah, there's a-
well within limits, but I just wanted the clarity.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Tim?
Are these units to be rental units, sale units, mix?
I would say that they are, I'll just let Ben handle that one.
These will be for sale condominium units.
Michael? Thank you.
I guess, Ben, this question's actually for you, and it relates to the live-work units. What was the philosophy behind putting the live-work units adjacent to the plaza where there is no parking for customers if someone were to run a business out of their home, if that's possible? I don't know if these are allowed to have occupancy businesses.
We tried to put the buildings, the live-work buildings wherever we could fit them. And then, I mean, it would still function if you chose not to use it as a live-work unit. It's great. You just have a door that exits out into, you know, a little courtyard area right in front of your house. So we tried to get as many of them as we could, and the units next to the plaza happened to work out for them. And then, I'm sorry, was there a second part to that question?
Well, I guess this is for the city. I glanced through some language in there. Could those be occupancy businesses where someone could have a business out of their home there, like a lawyer or whatever? Okay.
The home occupations, though, are relatively limited in what you can do. Like you could have one salon chair. I mean, you know, so they're meant to be relatively small businesses. It has to be it has to be people who live in the building. You can have only one employee from outside the building. You can only have one car visitor at a time. So it's a relatively restricted business use. You couldn't put a retail business in there, for instance.
I think it's an interesting point, though, because, I mean, even a single salon, one car, if you're talking about, you know, one employee, one customer car, and then theoretically 2 cars for the residents of that unit potentially, I don't know where they'd park if your business is in Building 12. It seems that over 60% of the live-work units are not fronting a public street, basically. That seems a little bit ill-advised, I think.
But don't forget that there's 2/3 of the units have 2 extra parking spaces.
Right, which doesn't matter if it's on their driveway, because you're not going to, it doesn't matter if I'm living in Building 12, I can't expect my customer or employee to park in somebody else's driveway.
But I've got 4 stalls, so if I'm running a business, I'm going to keep those stalls available for my customers. And second of all,
Possibly, but nobody's policing that, right?
my customers are policing that. Second of all, it's a pedestrian-oriented community.
Mhm.
I mean, a lot of those businesses are going to be serving,
Park at Dick's and walk down the street idea.
Yeah.
I mean,
that
well,
could be.
either customers that may walk, Or you're not going to, a lot of those businesses are not going to have customers. I mean, it's going to be an accountant, it's going to be
Agreed.
someone who goes to, or, you know, real estate agents that tend to meet people on site to show houses.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying they shouldn't be there. I just think it's interesting that about 60% of them, it seemed, maybe 70%, I didn't count them, are not accessible with sort of external parking, if you will, which is kind of interesting. But, yeah, you may be right. I'm sorry, I do have a question also associated with that. You mentioned something. My question was regarding jurisdiction. So it's which department is it that has jurisdiction over the live-work units in terms of what kind of businesses there, if they're actually monitoring how many customers they have and that sort of thing?
So I would start by saying that this proposal hasn't approved any uses within those live-work units. If someone came forward with a live-work unit proposal, that would get reviewed by the Development Services Department through the building permit and also through the business license that would be needed to be obtained. So that would be the time to verify parking and all of the other concerns that would come along with that business.
Are you saying that the owner of the unit would have to bring that, or
Correct.
Polygon by putting the live-work units there?
I believe that would be shifted on to the owner, who's ever owning the business.
Okay, and so which department in the city?
Our department.
Your department, okay. Please.
Sorry. And Lucy, doesn't the applicant also apply through the IHCA, and there's public notice when you open up a business in a live-work unit? Is that part of the process?
I believe you're right, Nina, but I'm not going to try and describe the exact process because I just don't know it. But there is some oversight from the IHCA.
Thank you. Michael, you want to continue?
I just want to seek clarification. Are these, is there potential to turn these into like an accessory dwelling unit? Could they ever be someone's primary residence, the live-work unit?
So, okay, that's an interesting question. So home occupations don't require extra parking. Accessory dwelling units do require extra parking. So although you have a bathroom and a closet, you'd also need to provide kitchen facilities, and you would have to provide a third parking space. And I'm not sure, I don't know, we'd have to think about whether we would approve that configuration where it's tandem as a third parking space. So there, and you have to have that, that requires a special building permit. I mean, it wouldn't be something you could do on the weekend.
If there's one thing I could add about the live workspace, you know, we added that in because we could, because the grade would allow us to do it. But I don't foresee us doing a lot of heavy marketing towards people using it as that. There may be, you know, a handful of people who come in and apply for a permit with the city to use it as such. But the way the building is designed, it will, you know, it doesn't need to be used as a live workspace. It'll function, you know, there's stairs inside that get down there. It could be, you know, just used as a bedroom. There's a full bathroom that's down there. It could be used as a den. It could be used as a rec room. So it, you know, it certainly could be used as a live workspace, but it's not something that it has to be used that way.
And let me add, these are in huge demand at Issaquah Highlands. We get calls about, when they go on the market, there tends to be a lot of calls, there's a lot of interest. So while Ben's backpedaling a little bit, I don't want him to, because we know how, I mean, for people to be able to work from home, to have a space where they can have, you know, like if you're a therapist and you want to have clients come, you know, these are pretty special spaces, and we've seen that they're very, very popular.
So if I could follow up on that, then two questions. One, just to clarify from the city, someone who owns that cannot rent it to somebody else to run a business.
Right.
Correct?
They have to, so it's whoever lives, the resident has to be the owner of the business.
Okay. And secondly, to Ben, you said you won't actively market it necessarily, even though there might be great demand for it. Will they be priced differently because they're live-work units? And obviously, we don't want to get into too much detail in terms of pricing, but I'm just wondering, does a live work unit have a significantly different pricing structure than the other units?
You'd like
Right.
a $5 per square foot discount.
I don't know if I can answer that question right now. And I do want to, I guess take a step back. It wasn't intended to be one of our main selling points, but that's not to say that it would not be marketed. I don't want to say it in that way.
Okay.
But right now, it's without doing the market analysis. I'm not sure how we would price those units. It could certainly, just because it has a ground floor access to the bottom unit, that could be something that we put a different price tag on it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Carl?
Same topic, question probably for city staff. Statistics on, certainly along Park Drive, there's a lot of units, both up from SIP and then in Huckleberry Circle. Can you guys get us some numbers on estimates on what percentage of those are being used? How?
I cannot tell you. I can tell you.
Eyeball test, accountant in one, PlayStation in another.
Okay. So Concord Commons is probably the most common and most popularly used. I mean, it's easier to tell you where they are than to know. I mean, there may be ones that they put up no sign and no outward distinction. So it's really hard to tell you. And the other thing that's a challenge is the business license. You would think that would be able to run a reverse search, but they're very restrictive about how we can use that information because we do it through the state. And so I'm not sure how it's as easy as it seems, but we'll see what we can put together.
Great, thanks.
Just curious, what's the designation for to be able to work in there for the units that have a live work? What separates them from normal residential units?
Absolutely nothing.
So it's
your
just,
next door neighbor could have it in their bedroom, and that would be a home occupation.
as long as they have a separate entrance.
So I'll tell you a little funny story. I needed a zipper. I was having a tailor in Issaquah make me a pillow, and I thought she'd have zippers. She didn't have zippers. I couldn't find a sewing store after Pacific Fabrics closed.
Connie probably has some.
She probably does. See, you're much smarter than me, Jim, because I didn't even think of that. I know. I think of you all the time, but not in association with zippers. And I Googled it, zippers in Issaquah, and it showed up in North Issaquah Highlands. And someone's running like a fabric and sewing notion mail order thing out of their house. So you would never know that if you drove by, but
So what's the cost? What is it? I mean, from a permit standpoint, what does it cost?
a business license, I think, is $59 or $69 a year.
Thanks.
I'm thinking about starting your own commission supply business or something. Scott.
Thank you. This is a question for the city, actually, and it is in reference to page 35, Appendix H, Urban Road Design Standards. And it's a point of clarification. Early on, there was a comment made that the drive aisles were 18 feet wide. And my question being, under this section, or item 25, it's indicated as 12-foot asphalt section with 3-foot concrete shiners. Could you define shiners?
Certainly.
Not that shiner?
A shiner is simply a strip of concrete.
Okay.
So
Usually not next to a Shero.
Hopefully not.
Are you sure?
No. I'm ashamed.
So-
No, we're getting new terminology tonight. That's
So
great.
typically the alley section allows a wider strip of asphalt in the middle, but because these are for fire service and emergency service, they need to appear even more so that you can't park on the side. So we require the 3-foot concrete shiner on each side for an 18-foot section. So it's 3, 12, 3.
Okay, that's fantastic. That was another.
It's not a winner, though, right?
It's not classified as a VUNERF, no.
Concrete. Okay. So that was another part of my question was, deterring parking within the drive aisle. So the third part of the question would be, are these drive aisles intended to be one-way or two-way roads?
They're 2-way, and they will be signed for no parking fire lane. So parking will be highly discouraged, and there won't be center lines delineating opposite directions of travel, but they will be designed for both ways.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Eves.
I don't see any provision as to who or how does maintenance of the open areas, the plaza, the pedestrian tracts, and I'm wondering who does that in this kind of a project? When it was a rental unit, I could see where that would happen, but since these are all sale units, I'm wondering where the dividing line is.
Great point.
It could be the IHCA, but it is, it may very well be the home, you know, often these smaller projects have their own homeowners association and can do their own maintenance, or they may contract with the IHCA to maintain it. But it's not a city obligation. They're not city facilities.
Okay.
So how is that determined? I mean, is it if they sell all the units and say, okay, we're done, does the IHCA have to, if nobody sort of steps up and says this is what we're doing, who does it?
So, Ben, why don't you talk about that?
So there will be a homeowners association with this. I'm not sure if that's a sub-association of the IHCA or if it would be on us to create our own homeowners association, but there definitely would be a homeowners association associated with this project.
Okay. Okay, great.
There's a, as Nina well knows, there's one of the requirements of the urban villages is that there's an umbrella homeowners association.
Right.
Our concern is that it is of significant size, that it will have the wherewithal to maintain itself and not just be a series of little tiny homeowners associations. But as Ben indicated, some projects decide that they want a sub-homeowners association for whatever reason.
Yeah, I guess my follow-up was really related to, if it falls on the IHCA, do they just have to accept it, or is that a deliberate act that, between Polygon and IHCA?
Well, no, they can't dedicate any land to the IHCA unless the IHCA accepts it. And the IHCA, I think, can penalize them if they don't maintain their property,
Right.
but I don't know that that means that they have to do it.
Right, okay, thank you.
One other thing to add here, in this area is the High Streets Association. And I'm not exactly sure how that relates to the IHCA, but I believe that it's different. So this
Yes,
would,
you're
That's
right.
true.
this would fall, and this is, I actually just had a conversation with them 2 days ago, and so this might be new to city staff, but they were willing to take over the landscape obligations for the landscaping that's below the wall that's next to Highlands Drive, and the only way for them to do that is through a tract that's being dedicated to them. So I proposed to them if, instead of that landscaping, if they could instead take over the landscape maintenance obligation for tract QV, because that's already a tract that's created there. And that's something that they're looking into.
Okay.
So I apologize that that
No,
was
it's okay.
information that
Great,
was.
so
no.
you're being proactive about that, obviously.
Mhm.
So, okay, thank you. Tim, did you get your question answered? Okay. Who else has a question? Yes, Chantal.
The first condition on the background, page 33, and one of you addressed that, but why is it that the tract QV is being reduced? It sounded like there was an agreement for a certain size and then it was changed. Can you expand on that?
I'll take that one. So the tract was originally 0.67 acres, I think it was, and that was set aside for what was intended to be 10th Way Northeast that was part of the High Streets project. They don't need quite as much room for their plaza, so in order to provide the additional property that they need for their units, that tract needs to be reduced slightly.
So that the property line wouldn't be under the houses?
Right.
But if I could, just so that I understand this correctly, that tract was reduced in size, but the size of the plaza is larger than the required plaza size that was originally
Right.
requested or required, I should say.
I understood the
Right?
other way.
So they're reducing the size of that particular tract, but
Okay.
this plaza size is larger than originally required.
If you turn to attachment E at the back of the report,
Attachment E.
I've added the recording title restriction that's recorded that requires this plaza. And on the second paragraph, it indicates that the plaza needs to be between 4 and 15,000 square feet. So they've met that requirement in terms of size.
That was my question.
Yes. Anything else from you, Chantal?
Yeah, sure. It's fine.
Ye-
No, I did have, I was actually curious, one of the requirements for open space for multiple use, and I understand at this point that none of it has been really assigned to anything, with just the idea of maybe a child play area. What about a community garden? It's going to be located a good mile away from the closest community garden. And, people don't have any space to garden any place around there.
So I think Ben should probably answer that one as well, but I guess what I would say as well, I think that community gardens are desirable. That may not be something that people want in their front yards.
Depends who.
I know. I think one challenge is that it may be a little tricky with the neighborhood type, which is a relatively formal one. But it's good. It's something we'll need to go away and think about. And I don't know if you want to say anything about that now.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I think it's something that we could consider, and just something that we would have to look into to see if it would be a good fit there.
Scott? Thank you, Chantal.
It's on that tangent, actually. So the question being, for the open spaces, what's the vision around features? They're intended to be park benches or water features or any play structures, anything of that nature within the 4 areas identified?
Right. So I don't see any play structures. I would say, I know one of the conditions is that we have a play opportunity, a children's play opportunity. And I would say, I guess we haven't really got to that level of detail yet. But you would probably see some benches around some plaza areas, some seating opportunities, but not a formal play structure.
Great, thank you.
Other questions? Nina?
Hello, thank you. Thank you, Lucy, for all those wonderful pictures from Boston. Weren't they yours?
No.
No.
I don't.
Got another
Are they from
Boston
Boston?
fan over there? Anyway, of course,
They're
that's
from
nice.
Ben. They're not mine.
I have a few questions, and they're all over the board. I'm going to do the easy one first. Lighting standards. Does this fall under an old design standard, or is there a way in our new development agreements we have the cover light standard for street lights?
So the streets around the project would already have the standard Issaquah Highlands streets. Internal to the project, alleys don't use street lights. And so the walkways, the plaza, the open spaces could have a different kind of light fixture that, consistent with the neighborhood type. It's going to be really an ARC thing. We look at, lighting levels and lighting placement and lighting scale, and really some of those other aspects are up to the ARC.
Good. I was looking at that too, and that we seek a pedestrian scale for those lights, and these seemed like they were more of a street driving scale, and I just wanted some further look at that, and then also to perhaps encourage the applicant to look at our new standards that have these nice ideas. Not that they're required in this one, but we did move that along, I thought, quite nicely with the new development agreements. So that's it. That was just a little easy one. Second one is about condition number 31 and removing the angle parking on 10th. And I wanted to ask about that. A couple things. One is that I really like angle parking. The other is that you get more cars with angle parking, so we lose parking spaces. So I wanted a little more information about why we did that.
So, 10th, so this is a little bit of a bureaucratic answer, but it's what I got. 10th Avenue and Ellis were originally built as part of the High Streets project using a standard with the incredibly creative name of non-residential street standard. And now we're putting in all these residential uses. And that standard has a very specific limitation on the amount of residential uses. And so when we get over that relatively low standard, we have to adjust it to make it more compatible with the residential uses. And this was something that the applicant proposed because they wanted a more landscaped edge along there. And we were supportive.
Okay. Well, I like landscaping too. But I also like angled parking because it gives you more parking spaces. As a bicyclist, I know you guys think I'm crazy, but I do prefer angled parking because I can see backup lights on a car backing up into me. I can't see a driver opening their car door. So I still want to advocate for them. So that said, I don't think I can do much about it, but I'll just voice my opinion and see if anybody joins forces with me someday.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Are you joining forces with me, Jeff?
Yeah.
No, go
Well,
ahead.
just a question. Did you address how many spots we either gain or lose by changing that? Do we know what that is?
We figured out.
Do you think it's a net gain or a net loss?
Loss.
It's a net loss by, you don't know what the number is?
10.
Probably 2 to 1, isn't it?
I'd guess 10, but we'll look into that and get
I'm
you
not
an
sure,
accurate-
angled parking is kind of inefficient. I mean, it once you get into the angle, it's efficient, but you lose a lot of space getting that first angle. So I'm not sure it would be 2 to 1, but I mean, there's definitely a lot.
Yeah, I figured a loss, but I'd like to understand what that is. Maybe next meeting we can get that number.
Lucy, so are we bureaucratically restricted from having angled parking there? Or if parties discussed it further and thought, well, hey, let's have some angled parking.
And more than one commissioner advocated for angle parking.
I got 2.
And a handsome one added.
I got 3.
Okay.
So anyway, next meeting. Thank you. And then, can I keep going? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Stephanie, for bringing up that issue on Ellis. I'm looking forward to more information about that intersection because that is really good catch. I didn't see that at all. And I want to mention my opinion about the live-work units. I like them. I like the way they are in Crofton Springs. I like the way they are in Concord Commons. They're down in Huckleberry Circle. Indeed, they are popular, and I think they add a nice dynamic to the community because they create a 24-hour use for the community. I love that. I share with Jeff, I was wondering about the access onto the plaza. Maybe it's just something quirky and it'll work for those people. It's kind of an odd, cool thing. They do have 4, as long as the parking is maintained on the, with 2 behind the garage, there is less concern about flowing over and disturbing other residential uses. But
Well,
I
and
really,
it may
I really
make
like
it
them.
a much more kind of urban plaza if they're
Yeah.
little businesses.
Yeah, because there's stuff going on. Yeah.
And maybe if there were angled parking that encouraged people to park at the end of the plaza and walk down. Just
I
a
can
thought.
hear the drum. It's being banged.
Hey, I forgot about drum. Okay, so then I have 2 bigger questions. I've saved those for last, and whether this is part of discussion later or just questions. I'd like a little clarification about, this is so big picture, Lucy, please help me, about enhancement units and how this is urban scale. And when the 500 units come over from the TDR, and this was supposed to be part of the commercial area, so then the compromise that was made with the Land and Shore Committee was that this would either be mixed use or urban scale. And then we have the letter in here, thank you for including that, Mike, or whoever did, from Keith, about how to define urban scale. And then when we're looking at these, am I the only one who's asking, well, is this urban scale? I'm not sure. Maybe it's borderline because it's at 20 units per acre, and that's just barely, or 20 point something, yeah, just barely making it. So that's something that either the staff can comment about now or we can talk about later. And then the other big picture thing is about the plaza requirement. And Lucy, remind me about when the plaza requirement originated. Was it that trapezoidal space down at the base of 10th Way where people would gather for events? And was that what we were trying to preserve when we created a plaza requirement going forward?
Okay, so I'm going to take the plaza one, and we'll work in reverse order. A little history lesson. So, development agreement, Appendix A, goals. At the end of Appendix A, there's this section called the commitments. And there were like 10 commitments or something that Port Blakely made. And it was one of their marketing tools, but it was in the development agreement. And one of them is that there would be this kind of urban space. And it showed buildings around it. And when we did, back in the midst of time, 2002, we did what was called the Town Center Plat, which was when Microsoft had almost all the land, and it was just like blocks where the cinema is and then the blocks between Highlands and 9th. We said, you have to identify where your plaza is going to go. You know, we're giving you the plat, but you have to say where the plaza is going to go. And Port Blakely went away and thought about it. Judd came back and said, you know, we're not sure that one central space makes sense. We think a series of spaces, now that we're getting into this, may make more sense. So we said, okay, we can see that working. That could be a nice element. Then High Streets came in, and they were taking the multiple space idea, and there was one on Block 24 and one kind of up by the wetland. And we went forward with that, and then High Streets went away, and Port Blakely was still pursuing the multiple space approach. And as part of the site development permit that you guys reviewed, we said, you know, that means that the donut hole had to have the plaza on it, because we didn't know what was going to be there. So when we did the short plat, we said, you have to put the plaza requirement on there. Then Devco came back and said, we want that property, but we don't want to put the plaza in a really central location and make it, I mean, there will be a little plaza there, but it's not really a community plaza. So it got moved to Block 21. And and that's the language that Mike showed, the 4 to 15,000 square feet. And so we've just known that when the developer of these properties came in, they were going to have to incorporate it along with the two plazas that Regency is doing, one next to the wetland and one kind of between the cinema and Big Fish. So it's going to be that sort of series running in that north-south spine.
Yeah. Okay. And Mike, did you want to answer that other question?
Yeah, I'll try to tackle the second one.
Thanks, Lucy.
Mm-hmm.
So you were asking about the equivalent residential units and how this project qualifies as urban scale. So that definition wasn't one that the city had defined, so we sought out other definitions to try to determine what truly is urban scale in order to be consistent with the 7th Amendment. There was a height limit on the 7th Amendment of 40 feet minimum, but what that was really getting at was that it shouldn't be two-story buildings. So I think all the buildings here are 40 feet. And then what we did is we looked at a couple of the densities that the city has at Talus and then within the regular valley floor, as well as some accepted definitions, and determined that for the purpose of defining urban density, 20 units per acre was that number. And that's, if you want clarification on how the city came to that conclusion, go ahead and go to attachment D.
Okay. Jim, do you have another one?
Yeah, just, sorry if this is off the subject a little bit, but I was, in looking at a map, I'm trying to figure out if there's a way to possibly connect this development up towards Central Park, because we've, what was mentioned was there weren't necessarily play structures, and it seems like there's going to be a lot of families within this development at 3 and 4 bedrooms. And that's why I was wondering about a connection up to Central Park. And as I'm looking on Google Maps, do you know, is there where Falls starts to jog to the north? It takes kind of a big north turn. It looks like there's almost a trail back in there that gets up there. So there is a defined trail.
A very nice one, actually.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
If only there were a shuttle service or something to move people around.
Maybe with Bellevue College.
Okay, thanks for that. So, do you have something, Scott? I still have a list of things.
Just a quick
Shocking.
question for the applicant. Is there a target timeline to initiate groundbreaking for the proposal?
Yesterday.
Yesterday?
We're ready to go as soon as we can get permits.
Okay, so
So-
it would be an FY13 or a calendar year 13 initiative.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have a handful of things, but before I ask my questions, I want to state that we will have time for public comment, so if anybody would like to speak, feel free to sign up. Let me also start by saying, first, I think these are really beautiful. These brownstones, I like this. I personally like this style. I think it's very, very cool. I also like live-work units. I was just sort of questioning, the practicality of it, because I know people do use them, and frankly, I'd like to use one too myself. And as I think about it, the ones fronting the plaza could, if you are doing your own business, whether it's, you're a software developer or whatever it happens to be, it could be a very pleasant place to be in reality. So I guess my concern, just to be clear about it, is if somebody does have that kind of business where people are driving to it, because of sort of the lack of parking monitoring that doesn't go on in the Highlands already, I just get concerned that we're stacking more up there, and so hopefully when those things get approved, that those discussions are occurring where you say, look, if you're going to have customers come and employees come, you have to use, your parking spaces, that sort of thing. But then that brings me to the next question regarding these. I'm curious about, we talk about 3 and 4 level units, correct? And I can't tell based on this, partial buried, fully exposed, live-work units. I don't know what's 2, 3, 4 stories. I don't know what the sort of the relief is of these things. Is this going to be, because I'm a little concerned that it's going to be very homogeneous, and I mean, while Boston streets in New York, certain neighborhoods in New York are really beautiful to go down those streets and see these brownstones, this seems like an awful lot of that in one place, and I just don't know how that's going to look. So if you could shed some light on maybe how those different level buildings are spaced in here, or if you even know that.
Yeah, there is. I would say it was our intent with the design to get that look, everything lining up, and so even interior to the community, you still have the buildings lining up as if you're walking down a street. So that was part of our intent. I know that you can't tell from looking at that two-dimensional picture, but there is some relief with the facade of the building where maybe some of those features may come forward 5 feet. It's not going to be a significant amount, but there's a little bit of relief. But like I said, our intent was to kind of get the flat look going along the front of the building.
Both horizontally and vertically. So, for example, buildings 29 and 30 will be the same height, and 31, 32, 33 will all be the same height.
There could be some undulation to the buildings going from one building to the next as far as the height.
Okay.
But it is a pretty flat site, and so if there is anything, maybe it's a foot or two.
Okay.
But there's probably won't be a significant change from building to building.
Now, I think it was Mike that said that all the buildings are 40 feet, roughly.
The applicants indicated that they're between 40 and 45, so
Okay, so
it
a
seems like
two-story,
they're generally.
so a 3-story and a 4-story are going to be the same height?
They're all going to be the same. If you were to measure from the front of the garage to the top of the building, they're all going to be the same. Where you get your difference is where you take that measurement, because some of the buildings, say the front is, the ground's
on
up a
the
little bit
downside,
higher,
yeah, okay.
and that front has a window well. Well, if you're to take that measurement, maybe it's 40 feet there, but if you go back to the garage, it's 45 feet. So that's where you get the difference.
Okay.
And remember, this is a traditional townscape neighborhood, which has, you know, and you referred to it, Jeff, the sort of Boston, New York, relatively
Homogeneous.
a flatter. I wouldn't use the word homogeneous, but Ooh.
I don't mean that in a negative
not-
way. I just mean that in,
Right.
that there's not
But-
a lot of variety necessarily.
Right, and I think, you know, there's a point at which that becomes kind of the ARC's purview, and whether they'll introduce some variety in materials or colors or details, you know, and we can provide a few pictures, but if you think about the project between SIP and the fire station, the one across the street from Port Blakely, you know, those are of the same sort of brownstone character.
Yeah, I agree. Just the quantity of the number of these buildings, and frankly, I think it'll look very beautiful, particularly where you're walking through the plaza, or or where you're around the open spaces. I'm not sure how that carries when you're going down the drive aisle, right?
Sure.
I don't know if it's going to feel very much like a corridor. You know what I mean? So I just don't know what I'm seeing there. So I don't know if you can.
And since those are alleys, I don't know how much the ARC regulates.
I understand. I'm just saying for aesthetics for people who live there, because these are the only. I mean, all the alleys are the only roads. So we have to assume people are going to be driving down them every day.
Right.
So I just think about that, and so I don't know if there's something else you can provide visually to us at the next meeting. That'd be
So
helpful.
one thing I would like to throw out there, what you have in front of you is just one of the schemes that we're looking at. We're actually, we're working on 4 different, just alternatives that we're looking at. We probably won't use 4 different ones, but we have, you know, this will be something to work out with the ARC. But what the intent is, maybe we would have 2 different schemes, and we kind of do different regions or different quadrants, and say this is one community and it all has one scheme. The community next, or not the community, but the group of buildings next door, maybe what makes it what you would think of as a block within this block. Maybe they might have a different scheme. So I think that might help to break up what you were saying, where it's just all one, every building looks the same.
Okay, yeah, and that'd be helpful. Whatever you can share with us next meeting would be great, just so I can visualize it a little bit more. Still on this diagram here, let's see. Just a question about between buildings 8 and 9 and 6 and 7. There are a couple of units that look like they're so on 6, for example. That looks like there are 2 units that front onto, I believe that's a walkway. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Okay, and then at the side of building 7, correct? Okay, I just want to confirm that those are actually walkways that would be more like feel like a sidewalk.
Yes, it would be a walkway. Yes.
Same with 29 29 and 30. Okay.
And that's true. And some of the conditions that Mike read, because the very end units on 29 and 30.
Mm-hmm.
So 6 and 7, those units kind of line up where the building across the way is the view.
Yeah.
But the very end units on 29 and 30 look
Looking
kind
at
of down the driveways.
That was my next
so,
question. Yeah.
Well, there's a couple of conditions that we can point them out in our response.
Okay.
That was to identify that there needed to be some landscape treatments in there so that the view is not down the alleys and across the driveways,
Perfect.
but that it's really to landscape.
Okay, thank you. So then, if I look at, I'm looking at the bottom right corner of Building 30 with the curved driveway there. You know what I'm referring to there? Okay. What's currently, I know we have a condition on that, but what's the length of that right side, the shortest point of that driveway? Do we know?
12 feet.
12 feet?
12 feet. And so that's one of the areas that, as Mike said, that we began to start looking at other alternatives.
So, I'm kind of I'm sort of
Crazy
vocal
guy.
on parking.
Parking hypochondriac.
I'm going to use that term.
But the reason for that, what's the typical length of a car? What do we know on that? 18 feet? Okay. All right, the reason I'm asking is because the reason we have that is so that it fits on there, and in this case it would be falling into, or sort of spilling over into the drive aisle. A lot of times what we're referring to is it's spilling over a sidewalk. In this case, I don't see any place where that would be the case, correct?
Right, it would impact the alleys,
Yeah.
not the walkways.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
and they're both equally important. I just wanted to clarify that. Okay, let's see here. Speaking of the length of a car, what's the typical width of a car when parking spaces are being determined?
Well, a typical, let me put it this way. Standard and compact parking stalls are 9 and 8 feet wide. So the cars are 6 to 7 feet wide.
Okay, so that might trouble me, depending on how we go with this. I'm seeing that the parallel parking stalls we're talking about reducing to 7 feet wide.
They're not being reduced. That's our standard, is 7 feet wide.
So if a compact stall is 8 or 9 feet wide,
Because you've got cars on either side, so to be able to open doors and things, you need to put the swing space in the stall, whereas parallel parking,
you just open your door onto the street and bicyclists.
I personally check my mirrors before I open my doors.
The average car width is 5.5.
5.5? Thank you.
Thank you, Siri.
I used to call him Wilson. I might change it to Cliff Clavin.
The average driver parks a foot away from the curb.
Yeah. Yeah, we can't regulate that. Okay, thank you for that. Sorry, I have a few more. Let's see. I think you answered that one. Okay, on the plaza.
Before you move to the plaza, can I ask
Yes.
something about
Go ahead.
alleys, since we're on alleys? In staff response, can you talk about any conditions as it pertains to the alleys, since 100% of the people coming in and out, that's their primary view of what they're seeing?
So,
Yeah, there's editorial in there, you're right.
so are you asking about, what are you
Are
asking
there
about
conditions on the
alleys?
aesthetics of the alleys?
The
Because
backside.
everybody coming in and out, alley is what most people are going to see of this development.
In their cars?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is really interesting because, as you know, that's an excellent point, because if you think about it, if these are all units for sale, theoretically, some of them are going to go up for sale from time to time. And my guess is most people aren't going to get out of their car on 10th and walk through the entire property. They're going to drive up and down those alleys, which could be very interesting. And also, I'm concerned a little bit about I know we don't need designated loading spaces, but as people are moving in, there's only one way in and one way out if you live between, if you're in building 12 or building 7, and if there's a moving truck in there or a delivery truck or something, you're kind of stuck. So I worry about that a little bit.
And the work units will have UPS deliveries too, fine.
And possibly FedEx, yeah. So anyway, food for thought there. Let's see here.
Can I ask a follow-up on the alley?
Yes.
Because I did not understand that when I was reading it, and it's on page 11, and it says the application shows that no residences will front onto or have their primary pedestrian entrances served from an alley. It looks like everything is being served from an alley.
No, the primary pedestrian entrance would be on the sidewalk or the plaza or
So
the green spaces.
You can't have your front door off of an alley.
It would have to. I mean, it's silly if you think about it, because you would drive your car into the garage. You would not walk out and enter it from the front, right? You would go in. That would be your primary entrance theoretically. So I get what we're trying to say, and I'm okay with it.
Really?
I'm just saying.
I'm not feeling it.
But I understand her concern.
That brings up a point for me. Is there any pedestrian entrance on the alley sides, or do you just go in through the garage doors? It looks to me like there isn't any room for any.
Yeah, I'd have to double check on that, but I believe that the entrances are at the fronts of the building, not on the garage side. But let me double check on that, and I'll get an answer for you back at the next.
So the only way to get in is if you have a car and a garage door opener to open the garage door and go in that way.
If you're going to park in your driveway, yeah, that would be correct.
Which is interesting for guests too, right? Because if someone's coming up, you know, their primary entrance is going to be through the garage. That's sort of kind of what I'm getting at. If somebody's parking in the driveway, their primary entrance is going to come from the garage.
Well, and one of the things that we wrestled with for a while, when you look at the trails, is there are trails that dead end at alleys, and we would normally not do that. But in reality, the emergency, East Side Fire and Rescue is going to park their fire trucks in the alleys, and they're going to need a pedestrian route between every single building to get around to the front doors if there are not doors on the alley side. Now, I will say some of the images that Ben and Gary have shown us over the time that we've been working together had doors from the alleys, but, that's not a commitment that we're requiring. It would be that we're going to need some kind of pedestrian connection from the alley in between the buildings so that it's easy for East Side Fire and Rescue, but that would also serve guests who park in those driveway spaces.
Okay. Is it a follow-up to that? Because I have a few more. No? Okay, let me get through mine. So on the, plaza versus corridor. So this main plaza, well, I think it's beautiful. I'm just wondering what defines a plaza? Is it the square footage that we're talking about? Is it the amenities? Is it, I can't remember if we had a definition for plaza, because again, while this is beautiful, it seems to be more like a corridor than a plaza. Plaza to me is a place where people gather, and of course people will gather on this thing, but it's really a kind of a walkway, if you will, a promenade, a walkway. So, bless you.
So, I think plaza is probably one of the main elements is that they're predominantly hardscape with some landscape. I understand why you're saying it's a corridor. I would say that it's more like a linear plaza. Now we're into semantics. Mm-hmm. So is there a concern that instead of arm wrestling, which you'll win, over words, is there a concern that you have over that?
Yeah, go ahead. Yes, I have some concerns, but Nina would like to take over.
No, I'm supporting what you're saying, and that in the definition of the plaza, because this was one of my topics, I did a little research and looking at the original Grand Ridge planning goals. A plaza was a common gathering place, so that was of interest to me when they said that. And then I looked it up in Webster's, where they said it was a public square.
So that's how I would have, think about it. So to me, like the open space between 27, 28, and 31 through 33, that seems to be more like a gathering place where if you're going to have a community, beginning this summer, what's that? There's a grade there, yeah. Is it not flat? That open space is not flat? On block 21 there?
Yeah, it's relatively flat.
Yeah. So, for example, if you were to have a neighborhood barbecue or potluck or something like that, that would be the type of place you go versus what they're calling a plaza. So I just, I'm not sure I have a real opinion as to whether or not that should change. It just, to me, it's a misnomer to call it a plaza as much as it's just a beautiful corridor. And I don't think it's a gathering place at all. People might stop and talk and walk their dogs and so forth, but the intent of a plaza, I don't think, is met with this corridor. And I don't know if we need to push for a plaza for that purpose if it's not the right thing here. Anyway, I don't want to force a square peg into a round hole.
Well, and one thing I would say, and I'm sorry, Chantal, I'm thinking about, I live right by Ravenna Boulevard, and also I think about, in Boston, Commonwealth Avenue. Sorry, I kept getting C words, but not that one. Both of those are those kind of linear public spaces. And, there are people throwing Frisbees, but there are also people who go out and have parties. They set it up and they have a party out there. So I think in some ways it's kind of interesting that it can serve a function of both being this direct connection and yet having the opportunity to have events and other kinds of activities out
So
there too.
it's 18 feet at the center and 10-foot walks on either side, correct? Is that what I'm reading? Am I reading that correctly?
That could be what we have shown on the drawing, but again, that's conceptual at this point.
Okay.
So I think that some of the conditions that are in the staff report would probably require some changes to those.
Yeah, 'cause I mean, I can't imagine with trees and 18 feet across, it's much of a frisbee throwing area, but I get it. I get what you're saying. Again, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying I don't think it meets the intent of a plaza if that's really what we're going for.
Well, and if I can add to that, just, you know, I was surprised to see the cross-section, the section BB on the drawings, because I had, even though it is a long corridor, when I saw it, it's the width of a street, which is fairly wide, and this shows basically two paths and trees in the middle. So it's lacking. I mean, you can have very inviting corridors with little areas, benches, and, you know, things in between. And so this doesn't show it, but could be that, as you say, that it's just not defined enough to do that.
Yeah,
but I would certainly think that just having two sidewalks and a few trees in the middle would be missing a great opportunity for.
So I guess my request would be then to, you know, next meeting, come to us with perhaps a vision, not necessarily, you know, conceptual drawings or whatever, but maybe just a vision of what that plaza might entail, look like, encompass, that sort of thing. Because to me it feels like two 10-foot sidewalks and a bunch of beautiful trees, and again, while it would be beautiful and great to walk up and down, I don't see it very practical in terms of a plaza. Okay, a couple more things. Yes.
Would would photos be a way to maybe
Absolutely.
show that? Okay.
Absolutely.
Just ask me really quickly. I actually kind of like the concept with the trees in the middle, because when you look at these other open spaces that aren't very wooded, you have a lot of an area where noises just bounce around in there. And so if you had the trees down the middle, it's going to provide a noise buffer as well for those residents on either side of that corridor.
Yeah.
For
Again, I'm not
just
opposed.
an empty strip of land, you're going to have noises bouncing back
It's
and
also
forth.
a visual buffer from neighbor to neighbor across too.
Yeah. Again, I'm not opposed to what you have here. I just want to get a better sense for it. And then the second part of that was, you know, are we going to force the idea of what a plaza is, or do we care in this case? And frankly, I don't. But I'm just wondering if.
I think
do we want to address
given us a wealth of stuff to respond to.
Sorry?
You've given us a wealth of stuff to
Thank
respond
you.
to.
Okay, accessory dwelling units. That was an interesting question. The live-work unit, could that be turned into an accessory dwelling unit, not sort of formally, but informally? Could someone rent that space out to somebody? And if they did, even without permission, who regulates that? Is that the ICA? Is that the city?
Well, you know, Jeff, it
I mean, it won't have a kitchen, probably, right?
You wouldn't, well, yeah, right. Without 220, you wouldn't have a kitchen. And, you know, if you owned a house and you decided to rent out 2 of your bedrooms, you're allowed to do that, you know. So, I mean, have roommates. So, if Ursula.
Except yeah. She might rent out my room. I don't know. But like you said, there might be additional parking requirements, and that's what, you know.
You know, if you own a house that's 3 bedrooms and you have 2 roommates and they pay rent, you're not required to have extra parking spaces. Now, I'm not saying that maybe you won't need them, but that's not something that we would require.
Okay, I thought you had said earlier that ADUs required additional
That's
parking.
if you have an ADU, which is a separate dwelling unit established within there. And that's, you know, just as like to totally geek out on you, you would have, it's a hard thing to actually do a legal one once you've built the building, because the building code requirements are tough to meet.
Okay, I think I'm near the end of my questions. On page 27, we talk about the mail kiosk, and I know those aren't identified yet, but it brought me to some questions regarding garbage pickup, mail kiosks, any of those central. I don't see anything here. Is every unit going to have their own garbage can coming out of their garage, and the garbage trucks will come, and recycling will come down the alley and pick up on a home-by-home basis? Is that correct?
The garbage and recycling will be kept in the garage. I'm not sure how they do it in the Highlands. I don't know if you just take your can out to the end of the garage or into the driveway. Is that what you do?
So
Okay.
they'll come down the alleys. Okay, well, they're all alleys, so obviously they will, but, so then my request would then be, I know there's standards on the width of garages, but when we require garbage cans in garages at the Highlands, we forget that we actually have to put cars in there too, and oftentimes they don't fit. Yes, Lucy?
We do not forget. It's a commitment that we've made with the IHCA and ARC that we will look for extra space beyond the minimum
Awesome.
parking stall sizes.
Thank you. And then the second part on that is, it says the mail kiosk part. I'm wondering if we can amend, or if we need to amend the condition that states, ensure the location is suitable for mail delivery, and I don't know if this is necessary or not, and does not conflict with designated parallel parking stalls. So in other words, as we identify the locations of the mail kiosks, are we taking away some of those parking spots? And even though you'd still fit within those numbers, I think we're thinking about how many, we obviously want to get as many possible spots.
I mean, that's what we do. We don't usually put it in a condition, but let us look at the language and see.
Yeah, and this has come up a number of times, so I'm wondering if maybe that should be added to the condition for any future development. Maybe not.
Okay.
So just something to consider. Let's see. I have a note here about doggy pot stations, but, I don't know if that's an IHCA thing or if it's a development thing. I think we talked about it with DevCo. Yeah, so as you probably know, a lot of pets in the Highlands want to make sure that there's, adequate facilities for pet owners, as there is across the Highlands. And I'm done. Seacrest out.
Could I add one thing while
Yeah.
we're talking about the plaza? And this is just to kind of tell you, or kind of explain how we got to where we were. The idea with putting the trees down the middle was to get a larger area for the trees. So you could put in a larger species of trees that will grow larger, as opposed to putting the walkway down the middle or the plaza down the middle and the trees on the outside. Then you're left with, a smaller tree that you need to get. So that was kind of the vision that we had, is you look down this corridor, you see this nice line of large trees, and then the pedestrian facilities are on the sides.
Okay, and I lied. There's one last thing that I wrote in here on it was sheet 3.0 in the back, the drawings in the back of the report, which look a little bit different, I think, than this drawing you gave us. This is an updated layout?
Some things could be, yeah.
So the part I'm referring to, and I know there's a condition around it, but did we fix the idea of making sure that the sidewalks and trails actually connect with each other across the alleys so that they're not off-center or off-kilter? Is that pretty much fixed across the board?
There is a condition. Generally speaking, it is.
Okay.
We'll give you a little graphic to make
Okay.
sure it's clear.
All right, thank you. Okay, any other comments or questions? Michael, did you have something else that I cut you off on earlier?
No, I was just looking at building 23 and 24 where they intersect, and it's like a pretty conflicted or constricted driveway there with the non-endorsed trail between it. Is that something that's still open to interpretation?
The trail or the driveway?
Both of them.
Yeah. That is, I don't know that, maybe in that situation that the trail doesn't work because you'd anticipate there being cars parked in the driveway. So that might be something that could need to be eliminated. I'm not sure at this point, though.
So we showed it as a path for that reason, because we weren't really convinced that that was a great pedestrian connection.
So it seems similar to that one area in Huckleberry Circle a little bit when you go through from Highlands Drive. Sorry, not Highlands Drive, from Park. Yeah, sort of going in. There's plenty of road and driveway space there, at least from a depth perspective, but you're right, if somebody parks, on the westernmost side of that driveway at 24, someone might be...
And the driveway is also private property, isn't it? At that point?
Yeah. Interesting.
Well, I'm also looking at
So these are condos, these are not lots. So you often just own from the paint in.
I think my bigger concern would, I suppose, be the volume of traffic through there because it's the primary road for all those homes as opposed to a parked car, but that could be an issue too. But so maybe we should look at that and see if there's enough.
I don't know, yeah, looking at that, I don't know what you could do. It just seems kind of a,
Yeah.
Well, it looks like you'd have the same kind of problem there, not necessarily from the standpoint of any access to fire vehicles, but as the end of 29 and 30, where you have that radius on there, I don't think that's a legitimate two-space parking. I don't think you can get 4 cars into those 2 lots.
Right.
And yet it's a 2-car garage up at the end. How does anybody even get in there?
Well, you could get into your garage, but the parking space probably, and that's what Mike and Lucy were getting at, is that those are problem areas that would need to be worked out, the driveway spots. So we'll need to figure out something for those ones.
Okay. Thank you. Any other? Oh, yes, Scott. I want to get to public comment
You bet,
shortly.
absolutely. So option for consideration, to Michael's point, was where that trail runs through between 23 and 24. Perhaps option for consideration would be to kick it over to the east a little bit where that green space is located and run a trail through there or a pathway through there, right? So there's an option there. And then second to that, from Jeff's earlier comment, fantastic call out around loading and unloading of moving vehicles and such. So not certain where the opportunity lies within the space, but something that should be taken into consideration considering the volume of traffic through the alleyways. So.
I'm sorry, we were conferring about something. You're worried about pedestrians coming out into the alleyways with the traffic?
No, reinforcing Jeff's earlier comment around the ability or lack of ability for loading zones. With the volume of units that we have in here and the volume of traffic supporting said units, where are there or where could there be opportunities to have a loading zone within the overall area?
We'll talk about loading.
Yeah.
It's clearly something you guys want to hear about.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So, seeing no further questions at this time, I'd like to open up the floor to public comment at 9 o'clock. A little bit late, sorry. Would anybody like to speak? Ms. Marsh.
My name's Connie Marsh. I have a store at 1175 Northwest Gilman Boulevard, Suite B11. I also live in Issaquah. And yeah, 9 o'clock, 8:30 is actually past my bedtime all the time. But I know that I can't get anything changed unless I come to this meeting and the next meeting. It would be nice to figure out how to change that. It seems awkward. But, so Brownstones. I've lived in Brownstones in New York. And the only thing that makes Brownstones good to live in is they're snappingly community-oriented. You have your laundry hanging out, you have your balconies, you have your plantings, you know your neighbor. There's lots of conversation. It's very, very tight community. It becomes your structure within your life and your secondary family. And that is the concept of a brownstone. I don't understand how this, in the tidiness of the Issaquah Highland rules, will create the community of a brownstone that would make it tolerable. Because they're tight and they're close. So with that lack, this makes me crazy. Many things make me crazy in life, so I'll continue on with that. If you can convince me how you're going to gain community and how you're going to have people hanging out over their balconies to talk to each other and how you're going to get the Highlands to change their rules to dry your laundry rather out on the line as compared to having to use your dryer, because it's against the rules right now. Anyway, so view covenants. As I recall, I don't remember, view covenants. Is somebody going to be able to build a building across Highlands Drive that could block the views that you oh so love here? What are you going to be able to see from the back buildings as compared to the front buildings as they're all the same height? I don't understand the connections for pedestrians across the streets and where they go. So where do your trails link up so that you easily know how to get to Central Park? What is your wayfinding? What are the requirements for not just within this, but out of this parcel? Because I remember long conversations about this parcel being an interface between the retail area and housing. And that is why there was a plaza. The plaza was not for this neighborhood. This plaza was an interface between the commercial areas and the housing, in a place where you could mix it and match it. And so the people who were using the commercial areas would be able to come over and play in this community area. And that is, I don't understand how that could even be possible. How are you getting the people from the commercial area over here to enjoy this linear plaza? Do they even know it exists? How fun is it for them? And that was the intent of this plaza series. I can't tell you how many meetings I sat through listening to that. And so this was frankly disappointing to me, because I was looking forward to this engaging area for years. I've been looking forward to this. And so I don't agree that this is good. I think this is inappropriate. And I can say that. I don't have to get along with anyone in particular on a commission. So I'm just going to be bold and say, no, it needs to be changed in my point of view to go along with the sociable public realm. There are no conditions that I could see to understand if this tract could be closed. I don't understand what the lighting standards are for all of the walkway areas and off-site views of the lighting standards for all of these. Are they going to be dimmed at night? Yeah. Could you expand what you mean by closed? Well, you remember how in a lot of the areas that are sort of semi-public, the Issaquah Highlands has said, well, we can close this off for a special event. And so then there would be no public access. Could you potentially allow a gated area inside of it for a commercial venture? I mean, there's all kinds of different things that we have talked about plazas for years, right? It's like, what can you do in a plaza? And so I didn't understand all that. And so for the lighting, if people's homes front this and it's lit all night long and it's bright, I think that that's an issue for adjacent, especially if you have your trees going down the center. I don't exactly understand that combination. And then when you look at the off-site one over Highlands Drive, you have your same sort of lighting situation from off-site. So what does it look like from across the valley? The alleys, you guys are dead spot on. You're driving through these alleys. There aren't any particular requirements for landscaping or make your alleys look good. There isn't anything that I saw saying that your house number has to be incredibly evident in your alley and in your front so anybody knows where you are. And that, it doesn't seem incredibly workable to me. Now I'm going to look at my list because I've gotten all riled up and ranted instead. Public gathering. So the other thing about brownstones is, I've seen a lot of brownstones. There's beautiful brownstones with ample vegetation that's well maintained. And while they show pictures, I don't see a commitment in the amount of vegetation in the fronts and the rears of these brownstones, so they look excellent from the front and excellent from the back, because they can look nasty, dusty, and inhospitable. And so unless you have a commitment as to what they're supposed to be, I'm unsure that I actually like that. Also, the transportation seems reasonably good for peds and bikes going this way, but it does seem like they're constrained going this way, especially on this side. So you have to go out and over to here, or you have to go way over to the plaza unless you can cut through areas. And I didn't see a condition talking about how easily you have to be able to cut around the buildings to get to the front door. It seems like there should be a maximum amount of feet that you would have to walk from an alley to get around to the actual front of the buildings, because there's no particular gap. Okay, you have a great lookout section over Highlands Drive, but if you want to allow the public in there, because it seems like a real public amenity, how does the public know where to go and that it's open? Because really, that could be a dynamite place, but it will seem private. So unless you want it to somehow be somebody's very private scenario, I think you need to figure out how to get the public knowing that they can go there. Like the walkway behind Swedish, right? It feels very open and inviting. This, I think you'll have to work toward that. And then the other situation is, oh, I live in this great brownstone, I want to work at Swedish, I want to walk. Well, that's really darn awkward. How do you get to the bridge? You have to walk all the way out. There's no way down over the wall. So you take tract QV to the next development down to get to the bridge? Is that what you do? But I don't know how that connects. Because I could see that you could want to live here if you were working at Swedish. Really, I'm almost done because it's like 1,000 degrees in here. Setbacks, again, I don't know how, it's probably a rule, but I don't know how close to everything things are going to be. Maintenance, I actually think that I would like to see a requirement saying that they do have to have a maintenance commitment. We don't care who it is, but it does have to be committed. Aesthetics, I did it. Mid-block crossings. So to get across to go to the retail area as a pedestrian, I want easy ways to do that from here, and it doesn't seem easy. Variation of height. This is one of those few times where I actually say maybe you want to fill something to make it less flat, because I think that might be the only way that you're going to get away from quite as much homogeneity. And you might allow some top story views for a while if you can actually build up the grade a little bit. I don't know if there's a requirement against it, but that would make some sense to me, because then you could have that. Okay, did any of that make sense, you guys?
Excellent points. Thank you, Connie. Okay, anybody else like to speak? Final call. Seeing no one, I'm going to close the public comment section at 9:12. We will open it up again for public comment at the next meeting. Okay, so just a quick response, or not really a response, but are you going to respond to that in the to some of her comments in the next meeting? Okay, and thank you. Thank you, Connie. I think you shared a lot of the same concerns we had. I think you made an excellent point on the plaza, which sort of, I knew there was a reason why I was getting to the reason the plaza was there, but you articulated it and reminded me of, you know, the reason for that, and I think you're spot on. Again, I still think it's very nice the way it is, but I don't know if it's the right thing. That's where I'm struggling. Any other comments from the commission before we move on to closing the meeting?
I'm afraid my comment earlier might have got picked up by the mic where I said it's not my place to care, and I want to clarify. When we're talking about the plaza, and it's in agreement with what you're saying, Jeff, and about the urban scale, the reason I said it's not my place to care is that, gosh, I love this plan. I think this is great. I think that walkway through the middle is beautiful. Man, I'd probably buy one of these. But my job is to interpret the regulations that are been given to us, and the intent and use of the plaza is part of that, and that's why I'm not doing it because I'd rather have that than this beautiful walkway.
Right.
It's because there's a purpose to what I'm doing, and also with the urban scale, when the definitions for this were made, urban scale had a meaning, and I'm trying to define what it is so we can find out whether this fulfills it.
Thanks for that clarification. So I guess what that brings me to with the plaza is just at the next meeting, if you come to us with what's the commitment for a plaza, and was it so well defined as Connie defined it to a point where we couldn't approve this given that requirement? So I'd like to understand that a little better. Okay, anybody else? Stephanie.
One other quick one. Just as I kind of look at this, this colored view map a little bit more, and, I love how walkable this community is, but like you say, if someone's going looking for houses and they're driving around, it's almost like it's two separate neighborhoods because you have to go out of it completely by vehicle to get to the other part.
That's a very excellent point.
That there's really no connectedness if you wanted to drive around the whole, or if someone was servicing the community,
I think
UPS, mail, whatever.
Exactly.
They're
Or
going
even
in and out on Discovery and Ellis, which may be difficult lefts or rights out of there.
that's an excellent point, and it could be guests too trying to find an
Yeah,
address.
you have to be very
or,
clear whether you were in this quadrant, or you'd be driving around and never find where you're going.
Yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, I'm concerned about circulation on solely on alleys. I don't know how that's going to play. Yes, Chantal.
Yeah, I wanted to underscore something that Connie said too about the pedestrian access. And I was looking, and I was originally very concerned about that southwest corner lack of egress for pedestrians. Then I realized the bus stop is up on north of Ellis, so at least that's not a blockage to that. But there's still that issue that it's true that there's no communication to the rest, to the bridge. It's a pretty long way to go around that. And I don't know what the solution could be to that. Maybe little stairs going down at that southwest corner or something like that. But it does seem that for all those houses, 22, 23, 24, 26, it is a long way to walk back to the middle, cross there, then go all the way back to Highland Way.
Thank you for that. I don't necessarily share that concern simply because the pedestrian bridge is closer to the grade of that middle section than it is to the bottom. So you'd have to, if you went all the way to the bottom, you'd have to go back up to the bridge. So there's...
The access is halfway.
Yeah, so the question really is, and maybe we can get this answered next time, is if you were leaving this community, what's the access to Discovery Heights circulation to get to that pedestrian bridge? That's really the question, I think. So I don't know if going down is the answer, but I think we should understand that. Thank you.
And if I can add to that for staff next time, could we see a little bit more context around, especially Discovery Heights, when we were talking about play structures, open space, access to Central Park? It did make me wonder what was down in there and if there's any ability for who owns property down below now, DevCo, that maybe DevCo and Polygon could joint venture on something that would provide something for both communities?
And that's around open space?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think to that...
But anything that needs to provide context for these issues would help to see
Right.
the space,
And
but
the
specifically
context
open
I get,
space.
I just wanted to make sure you were kind of giving a list of things you were particularly interested in. I wanted to make sure I knew which ones you were asking.
Yeah, to that point, is what's the access to the retail center to the north? What's the access to the trails and, other neighborhoods to the east and so forth? So, okay. Jim.
Just to piggyback on what Stephanie was saying, probably a lot of us have thought the same thing, but why isn't there a requirement as far as circulation goes? It seems like everything that we've looked at in the past couple of years, everything's been connected, but Block 22 is not connected at all to the rest in terms of vehicle traffic. And so, I can see maybe the bottom units, in order to connect them, without having to go out, it would have to get rid of a couple units. What is that, 24 and 28? But it just seems like there's got to be a way to connect those. Without, because somebody's going to go out onto Ellis and not get all the way over into the other lane and, try to cut it off or something. I mean, it's just going to happen. I could see people trying to get from the eastern side to the western side.
So this is no different than a block structure. And if you're coming out of an alley and you want to get into the next alley or the next street, it's a circulation system. We'll take a look at what you're asking, but I'm not sure that you would want or need, for instance, to have another alley that connected east-west to provide those sections to be connected. The streets will function that way. But let us take a look at and give a kind of a more global answer about how the.
Right. The one thing I will add to that, though, you know, you talked about an alleyway, and that's fine, but for instance, Ellis is going to be a fairly high traffic street. So.
Not fairly, very high
Very,
traffic
yeah.
street.
I mean,
And
it's
what, you
different.
know, I have to disagree with you a little bit, Lucy. While technically you're right, the difference is this entire community, 176 homes, are going to be serviced by alleys, which is not something we've seen in the Highlands as far as I can tell.
Oh, I can think of projects that have nothing but alleys. All the homes, all the garages face alleys.
It's not that the garages face alleys. The fronts have a street in front of them in a lot of cases, right?
No,
So-
I mean, I can think of whole neighborhood, whole collections of houses where all the houses face greens and all the, they're only alleys.
Okay,
So-
I see some of those, but they're not in this necessarily highly trafficked area, which is probably the difference. I think the combination that we're seeing is not something we've seen before, which is why it's got at least me anxious a little bit. So while you're technically correct, this feels different because we're right next to Highlands Drive, we're right next to Ellis, which is going to be a massive store, access to Dick's Sporting Goods and Marshalls and Home Goods, and I don't know what else right there. Plus all of the condos and the number of units all the way around it on the south and the east is very different than we've seen in the community. So I think in totality, it's different, and that's why I'm a bit anxious about that. Scott.
So carrying on that as well, I think another key call out here as it relates to access and high volumes is Northeast Discovery Drive for deliveries. We know that heavy vehicles are not going to be able to make it up, I would assume. Delivery trucks, semis, that hill? Maybe not?
I would not, that, it's.
I would assume that they would defer or prefer to come down Ellis Drive for delivery, would be my assumption. Thus, further increasing traffic volumes. Again,
Katsura.
assumption.
I mean, it's no different than a lot of the streets that have service, and there's been construction vehicles for Discovery Heights only using that street to come in and out. So, I mean, there may be preferences between Ellis and Discovery. I don't think either street is more or less available.
I wouldn't call it out as a question of availability. I would say preference is going to be key, and high volume traffic, I think, should be assumed for Ellis. And to Jeff's point, accessibility to these big box retailers, there's going to be a lot of traffic on that roadway.
Okay.
We will get back to you.
Anybody else? All right, good discussion. I don't think we answered anything. Let's see. I'm going to assume that was our open discussion. So is there any other business somebody would like to discuss before we adjourn the meeting? No? Okay, so the next meeting will be on July 2nd. It will be our Independence Day version of this meeting.
Red, white, and
Everyone has to be in red, white, and blue.
No sparklers, though.
No sparklers. Okay, so then at this time, I want to thank Ben and Mike and staff and Connie and the commission for all your work tonight. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks. And we'll adjourn a meeting at 9:22. Thank you very much. Oh, concerts on the green starting in July. So.
Michael, was that enthusiasm or?